Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Welcome. Really nice to see all of your faces. Recognize many of you from the Community Caucus. We're really grateful that you have come back tonight for our Southside Community Center feasibility study update. We are going to get started shortly. Help yourselves to the food back there. Feel free throughout the presentation if you are hungry. And then bathrooms are up, down, kind of you go left and then left up the hallway. We expect things to be a little under an hour, and we are going to be allowing for kind of questions at different portions throughout. So we are just thrilled to finally kind of share all of this work with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Reynolds to kick us off.
Thank you, Sarah. And it is obviously great to see so many people here. And this really is about this idea of community. And, you know, I've seen many of you and I love all of you, but we've seen a lot of each other in the last week or so, you know, and not always under the best of circumstances. But I want to start by saying thank you. You know, I have a lot of conversations in a lot of places about what makes the Lehigh Valley and what makes our community so special. And it is all of you and your commitment to your institutions, your organizations, your neighborhoods, and to build things that are not just about you. And, you know, I've been talking a lot about how now is a time when people are both tired and also fired up. And I know all of you are the people that are fired up to continue to do the good things. And we just want to say thank you for that. And that's what this really is about, is that idea of community. And just to kind of give a little background about how we got here is, you know, I've been here my whole life. Even though I've lived in Southside for a while, you know, when I got out of college, I was not born and raised in South Bethlehem, but it's constantly been this conversation over the last 10, 20 years about what is there for kids to do? Like, what opportunities do we have? And obviously we offer fantastic opportunities through the Bethlehem Area School District and other areas. But one of the things that has always come back is this idea of like, where can kids go? And one of the things that we have often talked about and people have brought up in different ideas is, where can they go to play basketball or recreation or hang out? Or where's that kind of community hub? And for a long time, this concept or idea of a community center has been floated around. But as we know, there's a big difference between an idea and a concept and a plan. So when we came into office about 3 years ago, it was one of those conversations that we wanted to have, but it was going to be a deliberate one. It was going to be one that was very intentional about listening and determining whether or not there was a need and whether or not it was practical to be able to do that. And that was not something that we were able to do alone. And that's kind of where this conversation has come from. This is one of the biggest things that we have ever tried to do as a city. So we're going to share a lot of information tonight as far as where we are, but it's important to kind of think about these 4 questions as far as what we've been trying to answer over, the past year plus. The first thing is like, what do people need? We were trying to determine like, what are the gaps? What is being offered now versus what is not being offered versus what people are looking for. It's not what I'm looking for or what Sarah's looking for. It's what people in South Bethlehem are looking for, and where are their gaps and where are their needs, if there are any. And we're going to kind of go through that as far as the study. Like, where can it go or where should it go? So the idea of a community center, we're going to kind of walk through that process today as far as like what the different ideas, concepts, kind of things that we thought about in trying to narrow down from the entire Southside into a couple of different potential locations, one of which, as we're going to share tonight, is the recommended location. And then we're going to talk about, obviously, those 2 big questions at the end. What would something like this cost, and how do you make this sustainable? Because there's a big difference between building something and being able to operate it. And we are not in the world where we just talk about dreams as if that's the way. You need to be able to find a way to provide this, because the whole idea of building a community center is just like Dunnigan, just like Brockville, is that it's going to be there, is that you're going to be able to count on it, that it's going to be something that you can trust to bring people together and offer services and things like that. That's not here for a year or 2 and then goes away. So those are questions that we're going to try to answer, that we have answered, and we're going to share with those tonight. After these sections, we're going to open it up for some comments, some questions. As Sarah said, our goal here is to keep this a little bit under an hour. So we're going to kind of go through what that process was to be able to determine what those needs and gaps were. And then we're going to open up for some conversation or any particular questions. Then we're going to kind of go through that process where we started by looking at the entire South Side, all of South Bethlehem, looked at potential properties, what was the kind of lens through which to think about where a property, something like this could go. And then we're going to open up for conversations and discussion. And then the last part is we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the next steps are in this planning process. This is all part of the report. Final decisions have not been made. You might see pictures of what conceptual drawings would look like. These are drafts. Don't complain about the paint color. Like, these are not things that we look at as like, this is what it's going to be. We took some information. We've tried to move the ball along, but it was really important for us to be able to share this and kind of scaffold teachers. I still remember that word from, like scaffold this information in a way that we're building how we got from point A to point B to point C, but also what we need to determine in the future before we decide whether or not we're able to build this or not. So with that being said, I'm going to go to our next slide. Oh, I need to turn that around, I think. And we are going to play our community anthem. That is one of the things that we were able to put together during the planning process.
I love that Bethlehem feels like a melting pot.
There's multiple communities that one could connect with that all brilliantly intersect.
And I feel a part of our Hispanic community.
The residential community.
Educational community.
Honestly, I feel like I'm a part of the whole Bethlehem community.
Diversity exists here on the South Side with the arts, diversity among the people, the different languages that are spoken here.
We really look to uplift each other, not only as residents, but those of us who are business owners, community advocates, educators, professors.
I was a Boys Club kid.
I met some of the greatest people in the city at the Boys and Girls Club.
That happens when you have a gathering point in a community.
The Boys and Girls Club, that former building, it's been closed since 2018, was demolished.
brand new community center is planned for Bethlehem's Southside, and residents are being asked to help come up with the blueprint.
Right now, there isn't a rendering for the project or even a concrete location for it. Tonight, officials wanted to hear firsthand from neighbors to get a better idea of where or where not to put it.
So what we see is that there's no longer a place for kids.
They can just go, let their hair down, and shoot a hoop or play a game of basketball. Invite friends to come over and get away from the stresses of the world.
Los espacios verdes, los parques para que jueguen los niños, por ejemplo, para que juegue mi hermanita.
One of the greatest challenges that our community members face is where to go to find information or to have their questions answered.
Resources that are free of charge to our students and our families.
A center that would provide year-round recreational opportunities.
Have like an indoor gymnasium, because during the winter months, because of daylight savings, by the time it's 4:30, it's dark.
A lot of kids in our school like dancing. They like having fun. Dancing spots for people to do what they like to do.
What a community center means to me, it means hope.
El centro comunitario es como una ayuda social a toda la gente, a los hispanos o en general.
Any space that helps our families get the resources that they so richly deserve.
What I don't want to create is something that then becomes a barrier to families who don't live in those areas and regions because they can't afford to.
To help people feel a sense of connection to South Bethlehem.
Mentorship and definitely opportunities for the children to get exposure outside of the community to things that they're not going to have any other way to get exposure to.
Any space that allows community members to be seen, valued, heard, and appreciated is an absolute win.
Having a community center somewhere else in Bethlehem would just be another opportunity for people, residents of the community of Bethlehem, to have a secondary place to go.
I know when I was growing up, we were at the Boys and Girls Club, and those counselors that were there were like family, you know what I mean? It wasn't just they're there to do the job, they're there to make a difference. I feel like a community center, everybody thinks of a building, but I think it's the people that make the difference the most.
What I loved about the Southside was we were a community.
One thing I admire about Bethlehem is the sense of community, and one thing I would like to see in a community center is a sensory-friendly room for kids with autism.
Play around with your friends, chill, have a good time, some basketball, play some games, have fun.
Be able to know exactly what resources are available to our families and to our community.
And what I want to see in the community setting is a indoor pool, art class, arcade room with game console, a heart village for love.
What I admire about Bethlehem is the diversity, the community.
What I admire most about Bethlehem is that no matter what weather or what's going on, everyone's always out joyful.
And what I'd like to see in the Southside Community Center is some healthy food options and programs for families and some after-school activities for our kids.
People would take donations and people would come and pick them up if they're in need.
What I love about the city of Bethlehem is the nice parks and the food places around the park so I can go eat at. What I love about the city of Bethlehem is that you can hang out with your friends at the parks and the stores are next to each other so you don't need to really drive around. And what I want to see in a community center is places for you and your friends to hang out and guys to draw and talk.
We need people to come together, work together, be united as one, and just come as a group and show everyone what Bethlehem is about. Thank you.
So we really have to thank all of you because that never would have happened without your contributions, without your participation, and without the generosity of your time. The thing that we were really blown away with this engagement process was how giving people were of their time, of sharing their thoughts for the future, the things that they love about our community, the things that make it special to them. And that goes through for so many of our important partners that are on here who opened up about their operations, their facilities usages, their budgets. They shared a overwhelming wealth of information to help us get a very clear picture of what the landscape is like right now in terms of the services that are being offered and what those gaps and needs are. So we just wanted to give a shout out to everybody kind of before we got started to say thanks to all of these crucial like nonprofits and institutions that really made this whole process possible. And then I'm going to also want to introduce kind of our dream team here. We're super lucky and blown away by the response we had when we put out this job to firms. And we have a really cool collaboration from our own Donna Taggart from right here in South Bethlehem and Ario Ortiz, who helped with some of our local outreach. And then we had Mass Design Group with Chris Kroner, who pioneered and came up with this idea of creating this video tribute just for this project that they'll tell you about. And then we will turn things over to our friends from AOS Architects. We have Mike Shade and Henry Brooks here who helped work through the project. So that's kind of who you're going to be hearing from for the rest of the night. So I'm going to turn it over then I think to you guys.
Hey everybody, Christopher Kroner here. It's great to see many faces again in the room in the same place that we were in for the focus groups and for our amazing community caucus last year. Just wanted to recall two things and celebrate this partnership. This was an incredible dream team that we were able to conceptualize an idea for how we would do what I would call a deep listen, not deep research. We thought that the better than having all of the words distilled through the way that we would interpret them, let's let your words speak. Let you see yourselves and what you're looking for as part of the answer to the questions that the mayor was outlining at the beginning of the presentation. And that's how we came up with the idea of using a tribute, which was a kind of a wonderful online COVID invention to try to celebrate things when you couldn't celebrate things together. And we thought that might be the key, but we realized quickly that people wanted to maybe also contribute a lot more, and more everyone did. Everyone gave us really incredible amounts of time, insight, thoughtfulness, and responsiveness. And having done these types of engagement efforts, that's one thing that I lead for Mass Design Group at the small office that I do, which is all about community embedded thinking. Each community is pretty different. You might assume that things for kids might be the same everywhere, but we're learning every community has a fingerprint. And it's really incredible to actually find those through lines and try to create a narrative that is cohesive, that explains what that really looks like.
So as Chris said, Mass kind of oversaw the community engagement, and this whole thing was really driven by the community engagement process. But we found folks wanted the more traditional ways to respond. So Eddie and I followed we did the focus group sessions. We held 4 of those. One was with recreational facilities operators like the Boys and Girls Club, the YWCA, Team 6 Sports. Then we had one with our community partners like Community Action and the Northeast Community Center and Linfield. And then we held another one with our education partners, the community schools coordinators. We're fortunate enough in South Bethlehem to have 3 community schools. And so we met with Dunnigan, Brockle, and Fountain Hill, as well as the community service office at Lehigh that oversees all of those schools. The BASD administration was involved, as well as the Charter Arts High School. And then we held a 4th one with some of the Brockle Middle School students, and that was really eye-opening. It was nice to hear from the young people too.
And they were impressive. I have to say that the middle school students were able to share the most incredible insights about your community and the things that really matter to them.
Yeah. And then there were some folks that just wanted to write. And so we had to create a survey, both in English and Spanish. And we had kiosks where people could record their videos, but they could also access the surveys on there. We went to community events like Donegan's Bingo Night and collected information that way. And then we referred to the Community Caucus. That was the kind of, highlight of our community engagement process with in this room, like about 9-10 months ago, March 13th, I think it was, 2024. And we had about 60 of you here, and we gave you an overview, and some of your work is around the room where you told us what you thought about lots of different things. So that was kind of our process.
I think we show.
There we go.
Similar slide, but different kind of target here. We're asking a lot of questions, but it was really interesting because we didn't really have a script that we wanted to do very methodically. We let that become an organic conversation, but we tried to make sure that we let the conversation answer these specific things. And we really were interested in what everyone already has that they love in Bethlehem. That was extraordinarily important, but then also trying to figure out where are the needs and those gaps, and how could they be best served in what locations? And so those kind of conversations started to ask very important things that we'll try to answer also about funding sources and, of course, about operations and sustainability models and hours of business. And so those are things that we are continuing to, I think, outline today in some of our responses so that we can give some of those answers.
I think that's, I don't know, the next slide.
I think it's also really important to see one of the things that was really incredible, and I think the young woman in the video was able to really shed some light on this well. Music and dance were highlighted as a really important cultural touchstones for everyone, that there are incredible energies and places to find one another by trying to celebrate one another and finding each other through the space of dance and music. So that was kind of an overarching theme that really came through over and over again, both in the community centers that we were speaking with, but specifically in the focus groups. And then all of the other wraparound supports, especially it was mentioned about the previous Boys and Girls Club, the things that were missing from that facility were repeated back to us as things that they would like to come and return to South Bethlehem. So you would see some typical places that would support that, of course, gymnasium and locker rooms and classroom space or breakout space, but also those incredible other components that are beyond the building or the walls of the building, being outdoor spaces and gardens, food trucks, and thinking about food and the ability for there to be cross-pollination or cross-culturalism through recipe sharing. And that created kind of what we call a spatial program model that we were able to talk through with our other partnering architects here, AOS, who AOS and MAS work together a lot, actually. We have a really interesting model of a combination of office work and how we think about spaces. And AOS actually was able to introduce the project to us, and then we were able to synthesize our response. And that's why we're in the room today. So thank you for that. I think at this point, we're going to invite Mr. Rose back up. Thank you.
Absolutely. We could just go back 1 second here. And I think it's important to, they've had success in building community centers. And, we talk a lot about how do we find these spaces that we share. And we have a lot of them. But the idea of what this community center would be is that it would be able to fit and form into what people are looking for it to be. And people in this room understand that everything that they provide as far as services are fantastic. So we're looking to see whether or not, and this process has been about, are you able to create a central location to be able to add to that, to be able to supplement, to be able to coordinate with, to be that place? We often talk about how in the city of Bethlehem, we have places that people think define our city, whether or not it's Main Street or different things with historic Bethlehem, but those places traditionally have not always felt like they belong to everybody. I went to Moravian, we're close to Lehigh. One of the conversations people often have is how do we make those spaces feel like they belong to everybody? And it's very hard to do that, which is one of the things that was kind of like the centerpiece of what this whole planning process has been and will continue to be, is how do we build something that is of the Southside, by the Southside, for the Southside, where people feel like it is their space, like they deserve to be there, like there's dignity to be there, and it's something that they can take pride in. So at this point, as we said, we're still on schedule for time. We wanted to open up if anybody had any questions, discussion about anything that we have talked about so far as the needs and things like that are concerned. One of the things that is in the feasibility study, sir, did we make those photocopies if you take a look outside and maybe grab it on your way out if you want to, if you didn't grab it on the way in, it's like there's a nice little chart that kind of shows what some of the different services are that have been offered. That was not the kind of thing you wanted to put up here because you couldn't necessarily see it. But it's kind of like the granular detail about what's offered and what's not. But I wanted to open up at this point, if anybody had any questions or any conversation about what they've heard so far that they wanted to do in front of the group. If you want to ask us afterwards, you certainly can. I remember from the classroom, sometimes you don't want to ask in front of everybody, but we wanted to give everybody the opportunity if you wanted to ask a question that you wanted other people to hear as well. Can you stand up just so?
But it wasn't really something that was accessible for children who are private. So I happen to live over at the lofts, Southside lofts, and there's a community room there. I don't want to make it my own, but I think there is. And I think what's really important to make something feel like it belongs to everybody, even if you know, that family can't get to that particular place. We have these small different spaces that we can use and start programs. And we have a little something going. It's not where it needs to be, but it's a start. And we're looking to expand to many different areas, you know, for our communities and to have the resources there when they come to visit and have these different activities. We have that opportunity to give resources to the families. And then create something that we can all come together and somehow get the families to go to that particular central place and have things and share, and then it'll be something that belongs to everybody, even if they can't get there every day. Whether it's a family that does not have a car, or you have disabilities, or granny can't do that, or abuelita, or whatever, you know, they can't get to certain locations. Even the library that's right through the South Side, a lot of the kids, you know, where I'm at, they can't get there. And they're not going to be, you know, walking, you know, even if it's a couple of blocks, they're not going to walk down there. I don't think, you know, that's something that's, you know, a thing to do. But I try to bring books to them really. And I think that, you know, we got to take a look at where we can use those spaces that are still available to us. Take a look at the essential.
Yeah. And I mean, that's beautiful. And one of the things that we often talk about is when you get people, this is about planning this community center, but it's also about forming these relationships and seeing what opportunities exist. So there may be that person within this room or within the planning process that has that conversation, like, I have the perfect idea to utilize this room for, which is often one of those benefits of us continuing to work together on both this project, but also all these different things that truly make us a community. So.
Consider growing blueberries, you know, or something that belongs to the community there, and we can share. I say blueberries because they grow in abundance.
Yeah.
You can't eat them all, so you have to share them. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about here. There's a lot of planning, and I think it's something that we can do and make it, you know, make it something great. And with everything that's happening in the world today, it's a very scary thing, especially with food.
Yeah. Okay. Carlos, did you have something?
Hi, my name is Carlos Diaz. I'm a lifelong resident of Southside. Go back to the 80s, and this is more of a comment. To see the gentrification and the housing crisis that has developed from then till now, I'm not even going to mince words. It breaks my heart. But the work of you people here is just giving me hope that there's going to be a brighter future. And I just want to give you, my guys, my sincere thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Any other questions or conversation on this part before we move on? Councilwoman Leon.
I had a comment, I'm not sure if you covered it yet. I'll do this paper yet. It's your needs assessment. I just wanted to say we haven't got to that yet. I think a lot of things that came out of the study that we're looking at, this is amazing. Knowing what resources we have available, knowing where the gaps are, it allows us to do work immediately. And this is a great job to all the community members that turned out for this. It really gives us concrete data to work with for what we might do.
Yeah, thank you. And as the Sarah had said before, it's really a thanks to all those organizations that offered that information. Just the collecting of that data is not easy. So thank you. Anything else? Okay, we will move on then to this next part, which is obviously, one of the central, if you're going to have a building, you have to think about where it can go, which is, oops, can't do this. Okay, so at that point, I think we're going to turn it to, you want to start that?
So I was just going to stand there for us. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Shade, AOS Architects. It's Henry Brooks, works with us. First of all, thanks for everyone for this great opportunity to be here and present to you. It's just been a really wonderful process getting to know folks that work for the city, for Donna, getting to know Chris and his team, and meeting many of you through the process here. It's been really enjoyable, and we're happy to be here. You mentioned, thank you, the chart that was handed out. One of the things that's on there is a list of all the facilities that we knew of on the south side and across the river for a few of them that provided recreational activities or spaces that can be used for community engagement. And we did the matrix you saw, so we got some institutional census knowledge ourselves of what was available. We talked to different people. We also then took an amazing tour of the facilities with Sarah and with folks from the rec department, Jody and Tony, and Darlene from the zoning department. And we looked at both those existing facilities, both recreation facilities, as well as available possible sites. So we did a pretty extensive walk, spent an entire day. You see someone I know back there, that's great. And got a good sense of what was available, what was both in terms of services, and then what was available in terms of places to possibly locate a new center or renovate a building into a center or rent some space into a center. We came in with no preconceived notions. Some of the factors are what sites, what land does a city already own? Certainly it's an easier level of entry into a piece of property that the city did in fact already own. We looked at how many people live within a 15-minute walking distance. You're talking about the difficulty of getting to sites and whatnot. We did very detailed maps. I'm not showing them here of, a walking distance to different parts of the city and as well as broken down by age. So we're under, kids 5 to 18, how far, what's 15-minute walk for them? And public transportation were the major stops. And then also finally what we got into that was the Greenway, which is an amazing asset that you have here on the south side. What properties are readily accessible to the Greenway. So that was really helpful to get to know. Henry, you want to?
Right. So, first starting place, as Mike said, is kind of what are all these, vacant buildings, opportunities throughout the south side where we could, potentially build a community center and, various community facilities, vacant lots, adjacent to different parks and recreation facilities throughout the south side were kind of the starting places to narrow down 10 sites throughout the south side where we would, try to investigate further. But it wasn't until we had our community caucus and many of you participated in these mapping activities that, you can see the wonderful results at the perimeter of the room where we talked about questions about what those gaps and needs are in the south side, what's currently working for everybody, and specific locations throughout the city that brought joy and had good stories as well as created areas of concern and places that people would like to avoid or think that they could be improved by facilities and intervention. And kind of laying all of that stuff out, those stories, as you can see, kind of obviously these maps are small, it's hard to read everything, but each of these blurbs all over the south side are showing anecdotes that residents of the city so kindly shared with us, and really overlaying that with, so we get over to the essential connections portion, right? Overlaying that with things like your key transit routes, the Atlanta bus line, that Bethlehem Greenway running through the South Side, and then identifying things like your community schools and the Hispanic Center and the community facilities that already exist, kind of created this, very visible network on the South Side map that kind of allowed us to then overlay those 10 sites that I just talked about and saw the most viable opportunities that kind of currently exist. And that's what we're looking at here. So those 10 sites spread across the South Side with your transit lines, these dark green areas kind of represent those positive, the accumulation of many positive stories, which you see will often revolve around things like community centers, community schools, parks that everybody loves in the South Side. And the pattern really started to kind of form as we worked through all of the stories and comments that were made during the community caucus, which ultimately landed on 3 viable sites for us to investigate further.
And if I can just say something at that point, it's important that it's almost like they started with a blank slate as far as like if the entire South Bethlehem, every piece of property was available, which we know it's not. And then there was a much longer list than 10. And then it got down to 10, these ones that are either for sale, for rent, that have been kind of, nothing been going on for a long time. But then that conversation about the areas of concern and things like that, I believe you guys did not include the actual properties. It was just necessarily what the benefits were of like this section or this section or this section. So people didn't get necessarily tied to at one particular building or not. And I think that that's really important when we look at these spaces also potentially had enough square footage to be able to meet what those needs were. So it wasn't like this is where we want to put it. It was more, as we said, what are the needs? How much space are we looking for? And then what are the potential locations that could be for sale or that the city already owns that would then allow us to be able to put it in there? So it was very much starting here and working our way down, working our way down, working our way down. And to get from the 10 to the 3 that they're kind of talking about that were looked at a little bit closer, there were other things that were then taken out. And, maybe you guys can talk about that. I mean, whether or not it's like the topography, or there's no parking, or there's no transit, or whatever it might be. There's a bunch of different factors that kind of went from this 10 down to the 3 that maybe you guys want to mention before we get to those 3.
Well, I think honestly, between the two of you, you just described most of the criteria. We wanted to know what land was available, what the city owned, was it big enough? It was an existing building. Was it accessible? Was it within a 15-minute walking distance from a lot of youth? All those things tied together.
Like, for example, one in there, like the 610 Flats building that was brought to us by a real estate broker we were working in. Well, that's a great, actually large commercial space, but the ceiling is not high enough for you to put in a basketball court. And the number one need that we heard was indoor gym space. So obviously that's not one we're going to move forward with. So it was kind of that give and take with all of the sites.
Yes, and after everybody gave their comments and great ideas during the caucus, as we kind of looked at just a couple slides ago, the list of program that people would like to see in the community center created, there is a pretty large need for space primarily, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of great things to put in this community center, and we want to find somewhere that can fit it all.
And there's no perfect location. Just like there's never a perfect answer. You're never going to find a space in which you're like 100 good things here and there's not one negative. So it's always a balancing act as far as what are the positives of this space versus what are the negatives of this space. It's impossible if you just wait for like this is the perfect location, especially in an area like South Bethlehem, which like much of the city is largely built out. It's just not going to happen.
So from these 10 or so sites that we looked at that occurred also in these green areas of opportunity, we actually selected 3 sites to study further. Mechanic Street parking lot, Windus Church site that Lehigh owns, as well as a site at the skate park. And we did what's called the planning term called the SWOT analysis, but it means basically looked at the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities, and potential issues that might be related to these sites. We looked at them quite carefully, studied, would the buildings fit on here? How close are they approximate to people? How close are they to the greenway? What would the cost of the land or procurement be? What amount of renovations would need to be done in the case of Windish? And did what we call concept test fits. So you saw earlier, Chris talked about the program, which included this high school gymnasium or a gymnasium, meeting spaces, classrooms, outdoor garden, all the spaces that we've talked about, general purpose space for dancing, yoga, whatever, office space.
Kitchen.
How would those fit on these two open sites, Mechanic Street and Skate Park, and how also would they fit into Windish Church, if that was a possibility?
This also allowed us the opportunity to look at one of the big decisions. Do you build something new, or do you try to rehab or retrofit something? Which is always the conversation. And it was good that we had a combination of sites here that would allow us to model financially what it would either mean to try to rehab something or reuse something or build something new, because there are positives and negatives to both. But it was better for our study, and it was good that it worked out this way, that major question was able to be answered by this mix of properties.
Through this process, we actually eliminated the skate park site as a viable site. It's got a very steep slope. Those of you that come down the road to get to that know how steep that is. It's kind of at the end of a portion of the city. It's not as central as the other locations. And it had some good points, but it just seemed like fitting the building on there as well as the access to it kind of moved it out of the equation. We had an ultimate goal of this project was to narrow down to one site that we thought fit most everything. So we concentrated moving forward on Mechanic Street and the Windish Church site. These are very preliminary, as the mayor said at the beginning of the thing. This building is not designed yet. You may see some paint colors you don't like that Henry picked. Not to throw him under the bus.
Speak up a little louder. Absolutely.
I'm sorry. So again, everything we're showing you for here on out is clearly very early conceptual design. We wanted to we're working for a construction cost estimate, operating costs. We had to get a fair amount of detail into a hypothetical building. This is not a real building yet. There's no money raised for this yet. There's enthusiasm for this. Everyone wants this to happen, but please don't get hung up on anything that we're showing in terms of a design. And with that, I'll let Henry take over. Oh no, Windish is first. I'm sorry. My bad.
And if I could just say something here on Windish is, the Windish Church, as we know, is owned by Lehigh University, and they had volunteered very early on in this process to allow us the opportunity to look at Windish as a potential location. So I want to thank you, Brett and Tracy from Lehigh. I want to thank you guys for allowing it. They've been going through their own kind of internal process, but we very much appreciated when, I had gotten a call from President Helbley to say that this was something that Lehigh was very interested in doing. And so then this whole process has allowed us to get inside, to take a look at it, to be able to make some determinations as far as that is concerned. So thank you for allowing us to do that.
So Windish had a lot of good pros. Obviously, we're reusing an existing building, which is a wonderful thing to start with in terms of environmental sustainability. It has some big spaces in it. It's a place everyone knows. It has a wonderful easy parking right across the street. But looking inside the building, there were some issues we had to deal with. It is on, those of you who've been there may know it's on multiple levels. The parish hall on the left is down on this floor about 2 feet from the undercroft under the sanctuary. On the upper floor is about a 5 or 6 foot elevation difference. So there's an awkward up and down. And of course, any new facility we want to renovate, we'd like to make fully accessible, which we did look at by proposing an elevator in this location here. And I don't need to go through all the plans, I don't think, but essentially we had a team facility and offices downstairs, a large kitchen and classrooms downstairs with new restrooms. And then upstairs, many of you may have seen that's a big gymnasium there, but I say big, it's actually not that big, but it was a nice size open space with a stage in it, which we would keep as a gymnasium, locate offices and a welcome space in the front here, and convert the sanctuary to a multi-purpose space, as well as add lockers.
Mike, if you want to just go back real quick. Just for those who can't read from this distance, just the colors define sort of categories of program that came out of the community caucus and your comments. So the yellow is education program, various classrooms. The blue is for social or health purposes, things like organization offices, community kitchen. The red is youth-focused program, things like a teen room or family rental space. And then, Mike, if you want to flip to the next slide, the green is recreation space, gymnasium, locker rooms, and then the blue is sort of public commons, multi-purpose space. Just you can kind of use those to guide looking at the plans from a distance before you can get closer eyes on it.
And that is how, like, literally that all of the feedback that was provided in the first few months through the community engagement has been carried throughout very, very intentionally. Even from these boards, we grouped the feedback we received at the community caucus into these kind of buckets that led to these recommendations.
So I mentioned the gymnasium space in here as being both a positive and not so great condition of the building. It's small, as you can see, there's comparative sizes to a middle school gym compared to a high school gym. And although it would work for pickup games and small basketball, ultimately this is one of the things that kind of, in addition to all the difficulty in renovating with the multiple levels, we kind of pushed this aside. We did take it a little further and talked about some of the things we might do in terms of the notion that it's a very obviously religious building, and how do we kind of tone down that to make this more of a community facility that everyone's welcome at. So we looked at taking some of the ornament out of the building, not taking the stained glass windows out; those seem beautiful, but replacing, removing the pews, making the spaces of what could really be a performance or multi-purpose space in the sanctuary. And on the exterior, modest, adding a sign, taking the cross off the steeple, kind of modest changes, but to help make it feel more welcoming to everyone, not just be as religious anymore. So now, Henry.
And so the new construction option that we looked at the Bethlehem Greenway parking lot, Mechanic Street parking lot, kind of provided a lot of opportunity to spread out a lot of this program across the site, give it a very nicely sized gymnasium. Everything gets a little bit bigger than you would find in the Windish plan. And you might even squeeze a little bit more program out of the space provided on the site. Some really key positives to this site is it's very flat all the way across, which creates accessible entries kind of at all points conceptually. And what we really liked about the opportunity for this Greenway parking lot site is just jumping back to the community caucus. So many people's preference was that a new facility would be somehow connected to the Greenway as kind of this super important artery and point of connection across the Southside. And we kind of conceptually took this as an opportunity to have a new community center on this site be something of a have something of a front porch that kind of connects out to the Greenway.
And this is the Greenway right here.
Right. Yes, and kind of everything in between the Greenway and the building that you're seeing could be sort of interstitial porch space for community gathering, people to park their bike, hang out, have a meal, next to the Greenway, take a break from their walk, and just kind of really blend the idea of this being a building and this being the outside. And it could kind of create a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of this, great amenity in the city. So again, you're seeing, green being recreation space, a large gymnasium, multi-purpose room could kind of bleed out into that front porch area. A large community kitchen could be on the side and have, access to a community garden adjacent to that. You could have a nice welcome hub to have a opportunity for community organizations to pin up resources and spread information to anyone who needs it, a place where people can go and get the resources and information that they need, offices for organizations to kind of post up, hotel space, shared working space. Kind of the opportunities are really endless. It's a great
And I think one of the things that we talked about a lot in designing this is making the space as flexible as possible, because we don't even know what in 10 to 15 years those needs could be. So making it that both existing organizations, community groups can come in and find like flexible office space. That say our health bureau came in and wanted to do a clinic or wanted to do a homework club there, like through the community service office, like that anybody could use that space and it would be very flexible. And just trying not to be so like purpose driven in how you were outfitting and designing the rooms.
Right. And just to add to that, once again, this is conceptual based on what the needs are and what trying to fit what potential needs are. So what buildings look like, exactly how this is laid out, none of that is set in stone. It's all just kind of conceptual around these kind of, guardrails that can we create flexible space that meet needs that people are looking for. But it's a lot easier to show people a layout there than it is just.
And 2 crosswalks.
Taylor and Webster.
Taylor and Webster. So that's the middle parking lot of the 3 parking lots there. That's the middle parking lot right there.
Yeah, in more conceptual kind of opportunities, just kind of seeing similar program to what we showed at the Windage site, classrooms, a teen room, a green roof for planting and sustainability. So it's very flexible and very open-ended based on the program that we developed from this process. And Mike, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Well, again, as everyone keeps saying, preliminary concepts, it looks like it's done, it's not. But this is where we had to take the project. A very important thing, Mayor Reynolds, is that we needed to get a construction cost estimate for both of these schemes. So we had to take them a certain distance so we could find out what it might cost to build a community center. Of course, we could add or delete from these scopes. Anything can happen at this point. But the new site actually came in as a more expensive project than the Windage Church project. You have the numbers written down for me, Sarah. Thank you. 15.8 million was estimated cost for Mechanic Street site and 10 million for the renovation of the Windage Church site. So it's significantly more. But pros and cons again of starting with an older building versus a brand new building. There's lots of obvious reasons for considering both. But anyways, Henry mentioned this is view, right off the Greenway with this wonderful front porch welcoming people in. Next, please. And a similar view showing outdoor dining, outdoor garden courtyard. This is a multi-purpose space here that could open right outside. Just open the walls right up, let people in. Teen rooms and classrooms upstairs, and the large gymnasium at the end.
Microphone?
Sorry, I thought I was a good speaker. Obviously not. I'm sorry. I think we're pausing here, right?
Yeah. So then at this point, before we go to talk about some of that other cost estimates and what those next potential phases are, we wanted to pause for the second time. We understand there's positives and negatives to every site. We understand that some of those are things that we probably don't even understand yet, but we wanted to pause at this point rather than waiting to the end for jump all over the place, for people to provide comments, questions about the recommendation, which I will say again. Like if somebody came along tomorrow and said, hey, city, here's this building that you can have for free that has all of these things. We're going to take that building for free that has all of these things. So this is just, once again, a recommendation on the path that we are on about where we would kind of go as far as building something. And just one point to make, and I'm talking about the cost, but I think this is important, is fundraising for a new building and fundraising for rehab are 2 completely different operations, which is part of what that conversation is about the 10 million and the 15.8 million. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but there obviously is that initial capital upfront cost that is different and it's more expensive for a new building. But when it comes to fundraising for something like this, there are differences, I will just say. I don't know if anybody's fundraising right now for an older building, so I don't want to throw it down.
And another thing that we did the cost estimating, and that's why we kind of went this far, but we also, with all of the input from those partners, we'll be able to create a dynamic financial operating model where we've made kind of assumptions about what it would cost to operate. And like a newer facility is going to, be less money to operate because it's going to have a, better building envelope and lower energy costs and kind of all of those factors. But the nice thing is it is a dynamic model. So as we get further into a process and have more hard data inputs, to, we can put that in there and evolve. And it's based on the costs, like of what our partners are doing right now in the community. So we really know what they are, local costs, and what it would cost to do it here.
Yeah, and this idea of conceptual is that we were trying to balance out that you want information, you want to know when this thing is going to be built, you want to know all of those things, but also we're not trying to make all of those determinations without having community processes and things like that. So it's a real balancing act. It's like you're writing a 1,000-page book, and you just can't, we're unable to, and we don't want to necessarily say we answered all 100 of these questions. We know what the questions are. We know that we answered some of them, but we also know that that list can grow as well, which is why this is kind of in the process that we followed. Winston.
So the question that I have is related to the layout of the neighborhood. Hi, first of all, long time listener, first time caller.
Definitely not first time caller.
But yes, and I shared this with, I'm on the committee. The question that I have that I'd like to share within the room is, given how the neighborhood is changing and the makeup of the neighborhood has changed and the layout of the community has changed, one of the target demographics, not the sole demographic, but one of the target demographics were the children of the community. And given that the children of the community are really relegated to west and east, the site that makes the most fiscal sense is smack dab in an area where none of the children live, which we all recognize. What can be done to ensure use of the facility of the children? And an underlying question, which I don't know if it's appropriate to ask, but I'm going to ask, can be done to, for lack of a better word, mitigate further the opposite of entrenchment, but relegation to the polarization of the neighborhood? What can we do to make this chasm not be as wide?
And to answer the first part of your question, I think is that it's one of those things that we're not trying to build the Hanover Township Community Center or the Bethlehem Township Community Center. And we're not trying to build a suburban township community center where people are paying $500 or $700 or whatever for a family pass to be able to come and utilize those services. So that next stage that we're going to look at answers those questions is like, how do we find an operator? How do we design programming? How do we design transportation? How do we design that so this is used by the people that we want to feel as if this is their space? So that is going to be one of those challenges that's going to help us try to get from point C here to point D. On the housing piece, the neighborhood piece, one of the things that I think we are also doing in a kind of a related realm, working with a lot of our community partners, is obviously create as much affordable housing as we can. We have the Gateway, our fourth project, which is on the eastern side. We have individual projects in different places. We had a meeting today with Representative Samuelson about a couple potential houses to kind of rehab. But that's something that we're always trying to think about, is how we're able to. The city several years ago passed the student housing overlay to kind of limit where those student houses were, under this idea that for a long time the demographics in the market of South Bethlehem was changing. As I've said many times, things like the Greenway are fantastic, but when you institute a public asset like the Greenway, it changes the market because people want to live close to it. They want to live close to steel stacks, all those type of things. So I'd be lying to say if there was an easy answer to that, other than that is moving in parallel in our attempts to be able to create as much affordable housing as we can, to be able to bring people into this area so it's not east and west. And it is something that it's ongoing, but it's also going to be one of those things that we were going to need to talk about as far as the next phase before we decide whether or not we're actually going to build this or not, because you don't want to build something that's not going to serve the people you're trying to serve.
And to kind of, add on to that as well, that was one of our primary concerns when this was rising to the top. It's very close to where the Boys and Girls Club was, and what are strategies to overcome that? What are programming? What are partnerships? But a really interesting thing, just in the deep data dive that the team did at looking at this, there are actually more children within a 15-minute walk shed area. The populations are higher. They're young. I mean, and we took out the Lehigh student population while doing this analysis, not to skew it. That there is actually a much larger audience of the clientele that we are hoping to reach, of the kids that we are trying to reach in that 15-minute walking area over. So that was a little surprising to me in the data analysis. And another thing I think we've talked about, how that transportation may end up being a really, really critical part of the success here. But the central question that we started with was, how do we make this accessible to the community that we are hoping to serve? And that has been centered in kind of all of our conversations and our financial modeling. We are not relying heavily on membership fees, which is how you can build a really fancy, shiny, Olympic-sized pool out in, some places.
Don't tell that nice young girl that asked for the pool. That
Yeah, I did feel that. I'm sorry. I don't think we're going to deliver on her pool. Angela?
Hi, my name is Angela Mitchell. I'm a citizen of the Southside, and I just want to say I like both ideals, but I like the Windish because it's in the middle, which this is going to be further. So my question to you is it possible whatever you cannot get in the church, can you do something here where there will be 2 spots instead of 1?
I will kind of answer that question back to what I had said, and I'm not going to speak for all of our friends from Lehigh University, but I will say in my conversations with President Helbley is they are looking for a community use for Windish. Is that a fair thing to say? So they are looking for a community use there. I think in our perfect world, after going through this whole process, the first thing I said to Sarah was oh my gosh, what a win-win this would be if we could get this new community center and something could be put into Windish that would be able to serve our neighborhoods and complement or supplement. Whether or not that has to do with education or healthcare, I don't know what it is. But I will say that from the first conversation I have had with President Helbley and with his team, that's something that they remain open to. I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to be saying here, and that's going to be part of the next stage. I will to give them so don't run to them afterwards, because we just told them a week ago that Windish probably wasn't going to be the recommended site. So I think they need to come up with a little time about what that process might look like. But for a long time, they had a pause on what they were thinking about doing here, because they were saying that Windish could be used for this, and I really do appreciate that. But in fairness to them, they deserve some time, because we just kind of told them recently there. But that's our goal as well, and they've said that's their goal as well, to come up with a community use that adds to the needs of the neighborhood as well.
Yes, in terms of trying to make sure the center is accessible to the families and children who want to use it, factor of distance is important, but so is the safety of the entrance of those 2 buildings. So it's one thing, you've driven on 4th Street lately into traffic for 3rd Street. Yeah, 3rd Street. Windish is on 4th, right. That, the front-facing entrance to the Windish Hall is on a pretty busy street. The front entrance of Mechanic Street site is on the Green Line, which is a little different. So it might be a little further, but it might also be a little bit safer if the families are traveling on the Green Line rather than 4th Street.
If we screwed out the freeway, it was a safer place to walk. And I think that if you have something in the middle, you can make sure something is small, if there's any room for expanding a little bit. And I don't know which way, I'm not sure if we're really willing to expand in that.
Fortunately, it's fully built out on the site, which was kind of the problem with the gym. There was nowhere that you could extend it out to make it like a middle school court.
We looked at that. Is there ability to be able to put an addition on, or you take out a wall to kind of push this back? But based on how the property is, there's just no real expansion possible.
do something right behind the church.
I'm sorry, say again?
Behind the church, the parking lot, there's a building behind it, right?
Yeah, it almost backs up to the greenway on the back entrance, and there's Country Club Brewing just behind there.
Yeah, but that's fine. It's, it's nice, like an after-school program. It's nice, it's, once people come up, somehow, you can come up with something in there, it's every time, single day, it's not after school. I don't know.
Joe?
Yeah, so Angela's idea was phenomenal, 2 separate places. May not be possible, but if it is, and you guys be so generous as to allow the community to use Landish, what about having one location dedicated more towards education, like a STEM rec center, and then this one an actual, recreation.
Yeah, I think it's a real possibility, and I think one of the things that will be the future conversations, obviously, is what type of community use? Are there institutions, are there partners, are there community organizations, education or otherwise, that might want to partner on doing something there? But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Just like what I'm seeing is part of how our kids get there, right? So if that's a problem, why not invest in transportation or have some sites in every place that we have our kids in? Like if we have some on 4th Street, there's a site there that it could go to the center if they're in the 5th. So some kind of stops that they could be picked up, or that the school also could help us with, like, this is a bus that's going to go directly to that site. So because you need to get the kids there, even if it's in the Southside or wherever, you need to get the kids. So how you get the kids there, you need transportation. So I would just be focusing on what kind of transportation we have for those kids to be there. And then if you offer that, then the parents won't be able to send it safely there.
I just want to make mention, in the church there was a church there that had after-school programs and everything. There was a music room, there was this room and everything. And they had a host of students, kids that used to go there for this program. And that's why I said, I feel it's appropriate, but then the extended stuff would be a great idea to have another center for certain things. So I was so sorry to see that program leave, but it was very helpful to many of the kids that came to that program. So walking further, I don't know. In the middle, I can see it happening.
Carlos.
The conversation about accessibility is important. However, I think it's important to recognize that if the people who are going to be using the center see value and are excited to go, they'll take the Shoe Leather Express. They'll ride their bikes, like I did when I was a kid. I walked 5-10 miles a day every summer, just going all over the Southside. So I think it's important and it's a good consideration, but making it a draw, making it a place, offering services that people want, which you've collected the data for, I think that's going to be a bigger driver. And all these places are off of bus routes anyway, so I think it's going to be used heavily.
And a lot of these questions are good questions for the transition into the last part of what we're going to talk about. Before I do that, Carolina?
It's okay. Is it okay if I stand up? It's not a power move.
You can do whatever you want.
I don't have anything super important to say, but that's the only way I know how to think. And so I was going to say, I think that it's lovely to hear the passion people have for the Boys and Girls Club that we had, and all of that. I think that for me, I want us to remember that I'm going to preface this by saying, wherever we build a center, the Lehigh Community Service Office is going to be there doing programs and supporting this work. We love it. We're going to do whatever we need to do, whether it's homework clubs or we innovate and create something new. So let me just say that, right? I think it's also important to note that we now have, within the last 10 years and plus, built community schools in the Southside. So each and every one of our schools also has kids in our buildings after school. We have at Donegan Elementary, they have almost 75% of their kids at one point in time or other throughout the entire academic year stay after school in their building for programming, right? Our families come for monthly programming that we do and all of that. I just want synergy, right? For us to all continue to work together and having faith absolutely in this mayor's office and all that you do. I know that we're going to do great work together wherever we build a center, so I'm not stressed about that, right? It's just about amplifying the work. But I do want us to remember that as much as we talk about, we want kids to walk here or all of that, we have to remember that we already have systems in place that keep our kids in safe buildings for longer hours. And we have a great school district that makes sure that our kids have after school buses and activities buses and all of that. So let's just it's okay. We all, I love the Shoe Leather Express statement. I'm going to use that for the rest of my life, and I owe that to you. But I just want to make sure we also honor and celebrate that while some place might be a little bit further and harder for our kiddos to get to, there are other systems in place that we can keep our kids in safe places and have families utilize programming there too. And I'm sorry that was long-winded, but I love you all, and Carlos Shoe Leather Express.
Okay, any other questions before we have the last, and we will stick around a couple more. Yes, Joe?
One question, what's the age range going to be like for this?
It's going to come down to the programs. We want it to be youth focused. So one of the things that came up with the idea is obviously 7 and 8 year olds might be looking for something different than 16 and 17 year olds. So that's going to be a question as far as the programming and things like that are concerned. Yes?
Did you say that the number one requested thing was a gymnasium?
That was the top thing, and then also the dance and music was a really big.
So why is if Windish can't have a big enough gymnasium, why is it?
Well, I mean, the recommendation was the Mechanic Street site because of the trade-offs on the gym, and also kind of what to the mayor's point about the capital campaign, that probably more likely to be able to raise the funding for the renovation.
I know it's important. I just want to add to your question. So that's the 100th block of Mechanic Street. That was, the Boys and Girls Club was right behind it. The number one reason why that center closed was because the target audience for that area no longer lived in that area. So part of it is yes, this looks great. This makes the most sense to build new in that space, but acknowledging that, yes, this would be the space that would have all the amenities, recognizing that the foot traffic or even the car traffic to bring people there, we need to acknowledge that it's not where the people live.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think the comments are great about the possibility of some different sites and that there already are options. I don't want to compare to other cities, but when I worked with the students in Easton, they were really blessed, and I saw the difference it made in their lives because they have community centers in Center City, north of the city, and south of the city. And that was ideal, and I know it's difficult. So they didn't have to worry as much about transportation, but I was wondering with all this data, because when I think of the community center, I always think of the South Side because they have the Boys and Girls Club, which is still great, but it was bigger and, a lot more options in the past. But so you can look at the data as far as where are the largest number of students, where are they living in the city, also adults that may be using the services, and also looking at, when I look at this sheet, I see that, there's some services in certain areas and others not in certain areas. So I was just wondering if you looked at that or were you be talking about that and addressing it later?
We looked at a ton of data, but it's a limited scope project. And yes, we did not look where adults live. We have charts of where everyone's within all the population distribution throughout the city. We looked at all that. And one thing, it sounds like everyone here lives on the east side, but there's a bigger area of Bethlehem is actually in the west side, the other direction. So there's as many kids over there as there are on this side, if not more so. So it was a dilemma. Where do we go? To me, the 3 blocks between Windish and Mechanic Street is meaningless in my mind, and especially with the bike lane. I mean, I'm a bike rider myself. 15 minutes on a bike is the whole of the city practically. Yes, sir.
Target area for the community center, I think, is the whole community. It's planned to make sure we have something vibrant on the south side to add to our great south side community. I want a Southside pride, my former assistant for your Ortiz, make sure I have at least, 10 buttons that say Southside pride. But I think this is for the whole community, it's my understanding, right?
Yeah, so one of the things, and then we're gonna talk about then, is how we're gonna look at the operation. But it's gonna be one of the conversations, as far as like, what does it mean for South Bethlehem versus other places? But it is from the conversation from the beginning, has been South Bethlehem youth focused.
Make sure we have a wonderful facility available within walking distance of all the kids that you measured. Throwing this out there, what if you called it the Greenway Community Center? So it wouldn't be so 100%, so people in other parts of town don't know that's only from the south side. But also, you wouldn't need to tell anybody where it was. Oh, it's the
That's a great idea.
You wouldn't need to put up cards or anything, I'm just saying.
That comes with the naming rights comes along with $1 million in RCAP funding from the state. Steve. You bring that back and.
Shall I go to the next slide?
What? Rachel, we were gonna try to finish here unless you had one thing to.
The only thing I wanted to add very quickly was that this might be a really good time to point out that in regards to all of that, the South Bethlehem is the densest area by far. That's why usually a lot of these areas like East Thursday are focused in South Bethlehem because density wise, no place in Bethlehem compares to South.
Excellent. Okay, so then I just want to kind of talk about this last section here, and then we're at 7:45, and I think we had said till 8 o'clock. But we will also hang out here. But I just want to kind of talk about this last phase, because it really does, I think, help to answer some of the way in which we'll answer some of these very legitimate questions that have come up. And we've kind of gone over from what do people need and where can it go. We talked a little bit about that idea of what it would cost and like, how do you make this sustainable? Because if you look in the study, the sustainability factor is obviously a huge part of this. It's one thing to build something. It's another thing to make it sustainable year after year after year. And I will start by saying, it's not just about raising the dollars. If we could raise the $15 million to build it, that's great. But we aren't going to build it without a sustainability plan. So I will say that as clear as I can. It's not just about getting those grants. It's about how do we come up with a process in which this can be sustainable, but also meet what that mission is. So what are the things that we are looking to do next? One of the things that is the next step is contract with a preferred operator. The city of Bethlehem is not going to run the community center. We are not going to have city employees at the desk. We do not want to do it. We don't think we should do it. With that being said, we want to find an operator that has experience to be able to design this in a way that answers a lot of these questions. As far as what is the gap in some of these services in these different places? If there are gaps as far as services that are being provided in the community, can we utilize this space over here in this room to be able to offer this? How do you make something like that sustainable on a year-to-year basis? So what our plan is to draft a request for proposal to go out into the community and contract with a preferred operator. That doesn't mean that they necessarily are the final operator, but it is likely that that contract would be with who the preferred operator would end up being the final operator. Why? Because what they would be doing is building out that potential programming, building out based on their experience, based on their knowledge. We have some of these operators throughout the Lehigh Valley. I'm not going to mention any of them because you're going to think then that's the operator. There is no operator right now, but there are people that do things like this throughout the Lehigh Valley and in other areas. It could be a combination of two different organizations. It could be one organization. It could be three. I don't know. It depends who would necessarily respond to that request for proposal. And they would help to build out that annual financial sustainability plan. One of the advantages of being able to have an outside operator then is when you go to raising money, you are making your tax deductible donation to that organization, to that entity, and not to the city of Bethlehem. I don't want any checks coming to City Hall. Like, here's my $100, here's my $10,000, here's my million. No, we don't want that. They can be passed through as Steve gets us the grant money to get to the community center, but that's not the model we necessarily want to follow. One of the things that we would do next is hire a firm as part of this process, when we're confident that there is a way to do this, to do the actual engineering and design. So then you move beyond concepts and you move into this is what the actual building is going to be. I negated to mention that first bullet point. This idea of building out the programming is in conjunction with the stakeholders. Not sitting in a room, not asking me, not asking Sarah what it is that we're looking to do. To meet with you, to meet with us, to meet with our organizations. So as Carolina said, how do we offer something that complements what is already being offered? Do we have more, I'm just making this up, do we have more staff on at 8 o'clock on a Friday because that's the busiest time? Do we not offer classes? Those type of things need to be worked out with our stakeholders. So the idea of this potential operator, somebody that has experience doing these type of things, would be to continue to work. Winston referenced a committee before. We had a committee of community leaders that helped to draft RFPs and be able to help us to get to this point. That's going to continue to go on. And that's an organic situation where nobody is not allowed to be a part of that process. That is community meetings, that is reaching out to all of our stakeholders. And then obviously help to design that community center facility and offerings. So this group that we would contract with, it's a little bit like when you design a building and you hire an architect to be able to do some sketches or initial design, but they're not doing your full engineering plans. That's kind of what we're talking about here, to be able to answer a lot of the very legitimate questions that came up. They're the same questions that we've asked. They're the same ones that are said, like, they're going to ask this question on Thursday. Like, yes, we know, but we want to be able to build out those answers together. And we've been able to ask some questions and answer them. And now we're at the next stage where I think we know what a lot of the questions are, and we would kind of like look to answer them together. Now, the other thing, this clicker is not easy. So one of the things that we need to do is form a development committee, because obviously $15 million just doesn't fall out of the sky. But people have built community centers before. This group here has helped people to build community centers. We have watched people build community centers throughout Pennsylvania and other areas. We are not the first people that have ever done this. And communities that are not nearly what Bethlehem is have been successful at doing this and creating sustainable community centers. It's not an easy process, but there is a path for us to be able to do it. So if we're able to come up with a one track on like, this is how we make this sustainable, we have an operator that we have faith in, people that are able to work in with our stakeholders, and then it's like, how are we able to recruit the private and the public donations to be able to build something like this? And that's what it would take to get to $15 million. A few weeks ago, I saw when, one of the state, they call it RCAP, it's I don't even, Steve, the acronym, but they're money that goes to economic development projects and projects like this. The Upper Macungie Township Community Center got $5 million. Upper Macungie Township Community Center got $5 million. Now, that project, I believe, is like a $50 million project. So if anybody's from Upper Macungie, nothing against you. It's just that's $5 million to Upper Macungie Township. So they're building a $50 million project, and they got $5 million from that RCAP. There are different state grants, there are different federal grants, but a lot of their project too has come from private donations, from working with Lehigh Valley institutions, working with the corporate friends, working with higher education. There's different ways that you're able to put together, working with the city. I have often said that the city is working to a place of financial sustainability, and we have made incredible progress in the last 15 years to be able to help to invest in the things that we want to see. Does that become the community center? Does that become capital dollars? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, depending on how much we're able to. But that is a real possibility. And when you add all of these things up, the trust, the confidence that this project can happen is why people want to donate. One of the things I've learned through my time in city council and as mayor is like, people, the governors, people in Washington, they want to donate to communities that are going to get it done. They want to donate to communities that have a track record of success. And we have that in Bethlehem. We have that in the Southside. So when I came up with this idea that we need to put together this development committee, we needed to have co-chairs. So the first two people that are that are going to be organizing this committee are, the first one of the co-chairs is Tony DeRay, who is the chairman of BSI Benefits. If you've ever met Tony before, they are a South Bethlehem business. He built an incredible company himself. And he's agreed to be a part of this process. He was part of United Way's annual campaign last year. He knows exactly how much he helped to raise, but I think he helped to raise somewhere north of 22, 23. Aaron's giving me plus 24, 25, $25 million that he helped to raise as part of United Way's annual giving campaign. So someone like Tony offering to be a part of this, and I'll read his quote because he could not be here tonight, is my belief and a core value of our organization at BSI that we have a tremendous responsibility to give more than we ever take from the communities that we call home. The vision of the Southside Community Center and the opportunities it will provide will change people's lives in the most positive way. There is no greater purpose, and we are privileged and excited to champion this initiative. Tony is really, really excited about this. He's really excited about using his connections within the community and bringing his ideas to this process. And he is all in. And I do not believe that if you had a draft, that there was a number one draft pick that you would pick before Tony to help to raise this, other than the person that I'm going to say next. And when you came up with the idea of this, Tony, as much as I love him, is not from Bethlehem. And one of the things that I looked at when I looked at like who should be one of the co-chairs, we're talking about youth, we're talking about recreation, we're talking about South Bethlehem, we're talking about pride. There is one person that rises to the top of that list when you think about the idea of being built by Bethlehem and Brothel Middle School and Liberty High School and growing up in South Bethlehem, just a couple of blocks away from here with the opportunity to go and on a much bigger stage. And I'm excited to be able to announce that over the past year, I've talked to him, and the other co-chair for the committee is going to be, as we get this going. Can I go to the next one here? I know. This is completely ruining it. Darren Hilliard. Yes. So I can't, it's like not landing the joke. But Darren, if you know, he's built by Bethlehem. He was, basketball star at Liberty High School, went on to be a basketball star, All-American at Villanova University. He played years in the NBA. He is currently playing in Europe. I don't know when he's going to retire, but he has often said he has more years behind him than he does in front of him. And Darren could not be more excited to be a part of this process. And we actually have a short video here from Darren with a video message. We're going to play it again once Selena gets the volume going. We'll try that one more time. This isn't our space. I apologize.
Try the dial. Okay, let's try that again.
Hello, everybody. Again, I agree with you. Not too long ago, we were relevant talking about the possibility of the youth state communities that are opening up in the Southside. Me being from the Southside, I know exactly what that means for the community. I'm excited for the future, and I can't wait to help them come together.
So Darren has 3 children now. He lives back here in our community during the off season. And I think he sent that to me like 3:00 in the morning his time when he was up with a toddler. So he has a place in my heart. But he's excited about this. Here on 6X, he's done a lot of wonderful things in our community. They're coming back here in the near future to be able to, raise their kids and things like that. And Darren wants to make this happen. So the combination of Darren and Tony, I really think put us, as we continue to build out what that development committee looks like, is a path to be able to get to that number that we are looking for. With that being said, if this isn't something that is sustainable and meets the mission, we're not going to do it. We have gotten this far. I referenced 1,000 pages. Like we have gotten to like page 400, 450 right now, but there's still a lot of the story to write, and we need to be able to answer these questions. We need to be able to answer these questions sufficiently so it meets the mission and when we decide to move forward with this. So, with that being said, we will open this up for discussion. It is almost 8:00, I believe, 7:58. So obviously a couple of minutes here, but then if we just can afterwards just kind of like wrap it up, and then we will stick around for any conversation afterward. Carlos?
What does sustainability look like?
Yeah. So sustainability is the idea that you're not using, as we say in the city, one-time revenues for recurring expenses. So if you're having $2 million in revenue on a year-to-year basis or $2 million in expenses, you need to find $2 million in revenue. So the idea of sustainability is the fact that, that when you sign up for these programs and things like that, that it's going to be there year after year after year. Donors understand that, cities understand that, states understand things like that. So we don't want it to be where, you're paying out of your savings account to be able to pay for people's salaries. It's got to come up with a model that we're able to be self-sustaining, but also without putting that on the backs. We are not trying to, and I hope I don't offend it, this is not trying to be just like spin classes and things like that. This is about the youth of South Bethlehem and the youth of Bethlehem. So that's what the challenge is. And I'm not exaggerating that we need to come up with that math equation to make this work. But we are confident that we're going to be able to do that. But essentially, it's something that once it opens, people know this will be open for a long, long time. Other questions, comments?
Do you have an idea as to what the annualized cost of running the center would be?
At $2 million. So that includes capital upkeep and things like that. So that's what the number would be. Once again, that is an estimate. But part of the idea of getting a potential operator is you don't know whether or not there's shared costs. You don't know whether or not they're able to take on costs. And I'm just making this up, but you don't know if it's healthcare, you don't know if it's HR, you don't know whatever it might be. You don't know. Yeah. So, yes.
Question, is there going to be a membership fee or anything like that? Because in Bethlehem Township,
Yeah.
there's fees.
Mm-hmm.
So is it going to be free for children?
Right, just in terms of like that $2 million operating cost, that includes 0 membership costs in it. Like we are not assuming membership revenue. I think it's too early to say one way or the other whether anyone, would be paying a membership, but our goal was, and kind of the challenge to the team was, how can this be accessible to all the children no matter what the cost is? And we've talked through ideas of does that involve creating an endowment that then helps subsidize the annual operating costs every year, and acts in lieu of how a membership fee might function in a more suburban, traditional kind of that membership fee center.
Or you create different membership opportunities like a lot of different places have, where for kids it's free or it's reduced or whatever, and for adults it's something else or it's some combination. I think that that's not something that Sarah and I have ever done before, and that's why I think having an operator to be able to talk about that, or what it costs for classes. Is a class worth $5? I don't know what those answers are, but that's going to be part of that next stage of planning. Questions, comments? Okay, well, we are going to hang out then, miss. I want to thank everybody for being